Chapter 24. A Problem with Details.
James Cameron and Morgan Robertson never met, yet they have told us essentially the same story. Cameron's version is a major motion picture. Robertson's story is dead in the water. What is it about Cameron's story that we like? And why do we reject the story of Robertson? In both stories, an unsinkable luxury liner on her maiden voyage, filled with wealthy and glamorous passengers, strikes an iceberg and sinks to the bottom of the North Atlantic. The catastrophe happens in April, and there's a terrible shortage of lifeboats. In these elements, the stories are identical. Is our problem with Robertson's version the fact that he doesn't pay enough attention to detail? You see, Robertson tells us the ship is 800 feet long and displaces 70,000 tons of water. In Cameron's story, however, the numbers are correctly given as 826 feet long and 66,000 tons. Another such error is the name of the ship. Robertson chooses to call her Titan. Cameron goes with the name Titanic. But it wasn't the details that made us fall in love with James Cameron's story of Titanic, you protest. Robertson probably just didn't write as good a love story as Cameron. Although I agree with you, I'm still troubled by the details. You see, Morgan Robertson made these mistakes because he didn't wait for the Titanic to be built, designed, or even conceived before writing his story. Robertson published his book, The Wreck of the Titan, in 1898, 14 years before the Titanic ever left Southampton Harbor. Morgan Robertson got the details wrong because he wrote about an historical event without waiting for the event to happen first. I sure hope he learned his lesson.
Chapter 25. The Magic Square.
Great photographers and graphic artists have long known the name of a peculiar spot on the canvas to which the eye is irresistibly drawn. In any piece of two-dimensional art, this magic square is centered at the intersection of the upper and right matrix lines when a tic-tac-toe grid is drawn upon the face of the art. Knowing that the eye will go to the magic square, great artists always put something there for the eye to find. This is not to be considered an unbreakable rule, but only an interesting little tip for those times when you're needing focus on a graphics project. If you had the paper and ink book, you could look at some of the examples included, but this points out one of the few shortcomings of books on tape. So if you have the paper and ink book, you might want to turn to pages 58 and 59. But in the meantime, we'll move on.
Chapter 26. Hubner's fifth rule of mountaineering. Never look where you don't want to go.
Like your customers, you can do only those things you have already seen yourself doing in your mind. You can do only what you've first imagined. When you imagine nothing, then nothing is exactly what you will create. What do you imagine for your future? Preston Bradley tells us, the world has a way of giving you what is demanded of it. If you are frightened and look for failure and poverty, you will get them, no matter how hard you may try to succeed. Lack of faith in yourself, in what life will do for you, cuts you off from the good things of the world. Expect victory, and you can make victory. Nowhere is this truer than in business life. Tomorrow's reality is created by today's imagination. In a letter to his friends in the city of Philippi, nearly 2,000 years ago, Paul writes, "Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think on these things." It was good advice then, and it's good advice today.
Skill and confidence are an unconquered army. George Herbert. Chapter 27. Escape the dungeon of depression.
As the lack of sleep wore me down, a sense of hopelessness enveloped me. I knew that nothing I did could change the situation. There was nothing I could do. I was convinced that I was laboring under some kind of curse, so that any efforts of my own to fight this situation were foredoomed to failure. Percy Noth. I am now experiencing myself all the things that as a third party I have witnessed going on in my patients. Days when I slink about, depressed. Sigmund Freud. I have made a captive of myself and put me into a dungeon, and now I cannot find the key to let myself out. Nathaniel Hawthorne. I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would be not one cheerful face on earth. Whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or be better, it appears to me. Abraham Lincoln. Have you ever been depressed? In your depression, did you say to those around you, I can't help it, it's just how I feel? According to the most recent medical journals, 1 person in 5 suffers from depression, and 1 in 20 suffers from a depression severe enough to require medical treatment. Depression, in its various forms, insomnia, fatigue, anxiety, and so forth, is the most common complaint heard in doctors' offices today. Is there anything we can do about it? I believe there is. Feelings follow actions. When we spend our time thinking about how we feel, we grow increasingly depressed. But when we spend our energies trying to make others feel better, we become increasingly satisfied and happy with our lives. You want a surefire cure for the blues? By an act of your will, find a person who needs help. Focus your mind on helping that person, even though you may not feel like it. Encourage him, even though you may desperately need encouragement yourself. As you become increasingly concerned about the other person, you will become less concerned about yourself, and the fog of depression will lift. In the words of Phil Johnson, when you do not love a person, do what you would do if you did love him. Use the strength of your will to take actions that you do not feel. Your feelings will change soon enough. Depression is insidious because it causes us to become fixated on how we feel, and the resulting self-absorption leads to even greater depression. Go back to the quotes at the beginning of this chapter and count how often the speakers refer to themselves. The words I, me, myself, and my occur 27 times in 4 short statements. The person who asks, "How am I feeling right now?" is plummeting headfirst into a case of the blues just as certainly if he had injected it into his arm with a needle. Most people believe they do what they do because of how they feel. In reality, the opposite is true. They feel what they feel because of what they do. Now what are you going to do?
Too many people overvalue what they are not and undervalue what they are. Malcolm Forbes.
Chapter 28. Emily lives inside herself.
Born into a wealthy family in 1830, Emily has her photograph taken at the age of 18, then lives a remarkably uneventful life until she quietly passes at the age of 55. It will be the only photograph of her ever made. Incredibly shy, Emily asks her friends to speak to her through an open door from an adjoining room while she stands behind the wall. Her life consists of tending her garden and baking. She never travels, never marries, and rarely leaves her home. Emily lives in a world of imagination where words are all she requires to generate a series of vivid associations. She believes that words have the power to alter us irrevocably. I believe that she was right. Though she is widely considered to be one of the greatest wordsmiths who ever lived, not even her own family knew that Emily Dickinson was a writer. It was only after her death that more than 1,700 of her poems were found hidden in a bureau drawer. Describing the power of words to envelop and devastate the listener, Emily wrote, If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. Having had virtually no communication with the world, how could Emily Dickinson so richly describe the human experience? I believe the answer lies partly in physiology. We see, hear, feel, taste, and smell our environment with 100 million sensory receptors. But because of our 10,000 billion synapses with which we think and ponder and imagine, we are approximately 100,000 times more capable of experience in the invisible world of the mind than in the physical world that surrounds us. Emily knew words to be the most powerful force there has ever been. Had she been inclined to start an advertising firm, it would likely have become the most successful one in history. I believe Emily was sending a message to ad writers when she wrote, "It is the imagination that lights the slow fuse of the possible." Imagination lights the fuse of the possible with the magical fire of words. Have you ever seen the world of the possible under the illumination of words? There are 100,000 places to go in the world of the possible, with each one as richly textured as the world you currently see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. Bringing things home from the world of the possible to the land of present reality requires only that you build a bridge of words strong enough to carry your dream. Some people call this bridge advertising. Some people call it selling. Some call it simple persuasion. Call it what you will. It is a bridge built of magical fire.
There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away. Emily Dickinson.